Welcome to Super Simple Security Principles. I'm Nick Jackson, and I want to love computers. They don't love me back. I'm learning how to stay safe online from my good buddy and master guardian, Makani Mason. Woo! He wrote his first computer program at the age of 6, sealing his fate as a computer geek. That's it. He knows his stuff, folks. Now he spends his time teaching people like me and you how to stay ahead of the digital threats we face and those bad guys. He keeps it simple and we love it. Learn along with me each week. I'll ask the questions and make sure he keeps it super relevant and super simple for us. If I can do it, you can do it too. This is episode 69, Security Stacks, 6 layers. Okay, we've been given the 4 phases, the 5 questions we need to ask ourselves today, Today, we're going to be jumping into our security stacks, and we're going to talk about teasers, some of the most neglected layers of security stacks. I'm teasing them. Pay attention to some of these questions I'm about to read you for today's episode that we're going to be going over, because most neglected layers. And this is the story. I'm going to share a quick story. Can I geek out, Makani?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So let me share a story of why I feel like layers, and especially when it comes to protection and security and things like that, are so vital. So, Makani, you know I'm a big skier, right? You know this. And look, for those out there that have some of those struggles mentally, man, I have to ski. Seasonal depression is brutal for me. So winter times, I got to get it in the mountains. I got to get some sunshine in. It's rejuvenating for me. So that said, when it comes to skiing, you have lots of layers you put on. Lots of layers, right? Dude, you have everything from the additional clothes you're wearing. I'm so lame, I'm getting older. I've got socks that have batteries in them that are actually heated. I've got soles in the boots that are heated as well, so I've got multiple layers that keep me warm, keep me safe, protected from the elements. But also, as you know, I tend to get a little bit crazy skiing. Not a little bit, a lot of it. The crazier, the better, right? The
Amen to
bigger. Right? So I wear a couple of braces, and I also wear an impact little vest, right? And a couple years ago, I was hitting a thick drop. This drop was gnarly. Not only did I have time to think about what was happening while I was falling, but it took time to fall. I was like, right? And I loved it. It was such a big drop that it took a lot of energy out of my legs, right? So I could only ski this run about 3 times. And then literally, even though I had skied countless times that season, my legs would be exhausted. So on my 3rd run, here I was skiing. I lost a ski in the air, dude, right? You know the outcome. I landed, made the decision to try and keep skiing. I did, but I couldn't slow down. Couldn't slow my speed at that point in time. Just one ski. I'm not a good enough skier to slow myself down with just the one ski. And I was head straight for a tree. So I used my leg that had lost the ski to try and brace for that impact. I literally drove my femur through my tibia plateau and split it in half. Plate, screws, holding my leg together now, right? It was brutal.
Yes.
The doctors were amazed. They were blown away that A, I didn't have a compound fracture. B, that I was on the side of a mountain to where most people never go, right? And the fact that somehow I'd gotten out of this canyon and gotten down to the hospital for help. And they're like, how did you do this? And you must have been sitting there forever. And I was. Like, when I was hurt, luckily I was skiing with a buddy, so I did have what I considered a layer of protection. I went with someone else. I had a ski buddy there, right? He was able to help me at least try and put my leg at an angle that didn't make me so nauseated, because I was looking at the backside of my boot at this point in time. Because I had worn my braces that day, it literally held those bones that quite honestly shattered, held them together in a way that none of them went flying, protruding from my skin, leaving me with what would have been an open compound fracture for, quite honestly, hours waiting for help. So because I had worn that layer, shout out to Brace Layer. Like, hey, Brace Layer, you make a crazy awesome product. Crazy awesome product. It held everything in place. Not only did it hold it in place, but it was a neoprene one that was warm enough that I knew that I was hurt pretty bad. So I was like, I got to make sure I try and keep some of the inflammation out so that I don't start to lose blood flow. So this might sound like I know injuries too well. Maybe I do. So I started packing the outside layer, the most outer side layer of my ski pants with snow. Started packing it. So I packed my whole knee, surrounded it with snow, and packed that snow in nice and tight. So I had this cold compress sitting on my knee, right?
Yeah.
It was all these layers that literally, A, saved my leg, B, quite honestly could have saved my life, because I was protected in a way that, quite honestly, had I not had a brace on, different story, right? Like, so it took all of these layers of protection to survive the impact that I took. And so we kind of toyed with some words last episode, and I wanted to bring those back, make sure we're remembering the 5 questions, and just those simple things. If you need to refresh, jump on, listen to them again. We'd love to, get your thoughts. But today, we're going to be talking about the 6 layers. And to me, this is going to be really, really important. So, McConnie, where do we begin? Long intro, long story. Sorry, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. I can share pictures.
No worries. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it is a good story, and it's definitely a good illustration of what we're trying to accomplish, not only with today's episode really, but I think about the 4 phases as well, because you wanted to avoid the problem, but you had a problem, you had some good things to help you when the problem did happen, and that sort of thing, and that's kind of related to the 4 phases. So yeah, there's a lot of good things, but what I'd say is let's just start with naming them.
Okay.
Knowledge, skills, habits, people, tools, and services. And these hopefully are mostly pretty familiar words. We'll walk through what they mean in the context of online security, but mostly they're the same meanings and things you're going to be familiar with for the most part. And the idea is, just like with the 4 phases, that as you walk through, you consider each of these layer types, because again, you don't necessarily always have one in them, but I would think for most security stacks of any significant scope that you're going to have some in all 6 layers.
Yeah.
So we'll see as we actually get into specifically building them with this kind of framework in mind, right? But
Right.
so one of the things, and this is, you talk about geeking out earlier, that so in the online security world, in the geek world, one of the main purposes of multiple layers is what they call redundancy.
Yeah.
In some settings, redundancy is wasteful, like a bad thing, you want to avoid it, right?
Right.
But obviously, there are some scenarios, and in the case of online security, when bad things are happening, redundancy is your best friend, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the real world, like if one road is closed, it's nice to have another road that's open, right? And so, anyway, in online security, redundancy is absolutely one of the best things that you can strive for.
Right. Okay.
So, okay, so then we break up the 6 layers into 2 groups of 3.
Okay.
What I call the solo layers and the team layers,
Okay. Okay.
right? The solo layers are knowledge, skills, and habits. And, I call them that because they're changes that you make to yourself. Things you know, things you do. Um, like, and I won't say that they're, go back to our opening question, the neglected. Like, I wouldn't say they're necessarily the most important layers. Um, but
But
I
they're
do
just
feel
the
like,
overseen.
yeah, I feel like they tend to be the most overlooked,
Yeah.
right? Neglected. And I was thinking about this in terms of like exercise and physical health.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
That's where
in the
my
world,
brain initially went.
okay, because there's lots of tools or lots of things available to us, dumbbells,
Right.
treadmills, right? And all those are important, right? But it's also clear that sleep, nutrition, good habits are also critical to physical health. And right, nobody's really going to argue that, obviously, uh, overall. But
Right. Right.
I think with online security, the personal ones are overlooked because, um, compared to physical health, it's obvious that like nobody can like do the exercise for you. You can eat right for you, get good sleep for you.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Right. Right. Well, exactly. I know. See, even in that, your brain's like, yeah, if somebody could just do it, right? And so
Yeah.
that's exactly where our brain goes with online security. And the thing is, with online security, it can happen to some degree,
Right.
right? Like there is some degree of protection that other people can just do for you.
Right.
So that's the other part of the allure to just the other things outside of yourself. But at the end of the day, there's also a lot that's just dependent on you. You're the one using your device. You're the one, clicking on things on your phone, reading it, doing, all these things. So they're critical as well.
Right. Right.
Your knowledge, skills, and habits are critical.
Right. Yeah.
So, uh, type 1, knowledge, layer, or type 1, I kind of calling them both either layer or type, but they're layer types anyway.
Yeah.
Um, with home networks, we had a lot of these, and in general, you're going to have a lot of these,
Okay.
right? Like there's just always a lot of basic things to understand about. Um, like with home network, we talked about how a computer network functions, what a
Yeah.
router is, what a
Hmm.
firewall is. And you just got to kind of start with some of these basic core concepts that once you understand them, okay, that's our foundation. We can move on. But um, and and again, it's kind of obvious, but I feel like it's a critical starting point to actually really acknowledge that there are a few things we have to learn because our tendency is just give us the thing that'll fix it. Just, give me the piece of software on there. Don't tell me how it works. Don't tell me why I need it. Any of these things, right? Like I know this from teaching people over years, right? They just give me the thing at the end.
You might have just barely read my brain. I was like, man, is there any way we could just skip this?
Yeah, exactly. I know. I know. But yeah.
But it's vital. Often, again, you know, can we say this one is kind of one that's overlooked?
Yeah, I
you
think
know?
so a lot. I mean, you go look at guides,
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously there's teaching things, but when you look at guides of like, okay, here's the steps you walk through to secure a device or to do, here's the 10 most important security steps.
Yeah.
There's almost never anything about like actually learning anything, understanding anything, developing the right skills, uh, establishing the right habits,
Right.
and that's a core part of what we're going to focus on is actually identifying, okay, if you want to stay safe from phishing or whatever, these are the specific things. We're not going to leave it open. Like, it's going to be a very, very tight specific checklist. You need to understand this concept, you need to develop this skill, you need to have this habit, and try to have it as small as possible, right? We do want to help people do it fast and effectively, but that doing, and actually, in fact, in my opinion, because there are things that you develop within yourself, these are the most, like, they're the biggest bang for your buck in the long term,
Yeah.
you know, because you learn something, you develop a skill, you develop a habit, and even if things have to change a little bit, technology changes, those are going to be the most persistent, the most sticky, have the most value long term. Tools are going to change, other things are going to change. As we know, our software and hardware, I mean, they're constantly changing, right?
Constantly. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. And I'll close with this part on the knowledge is like, I mean, I've never considered myself much of a car guy. Okay.
Right.
And I've been I'm not even going to bother learning anything. And I've over the years, I've regretted that.
Right.
And
Right.
like, I've seen the cost, like, and I still don't aspire to be a mechanic, right? I'm not expecting
Right.
anybody to desire to be a computer programmer like I am, but
Right.
there's definitely kind of this 80-20 sort of thing where I could learn a little bit more, and it would have been a really good investment of my time. Like, I would have gotten back more time and money than I invested up front. And that is definitely what my goal here is with all that we do is, yes, you're going to invest a little bit up front, but even if you evaluate it in terms of your overall time, money, effort, headache, frustration, pains, like, it's going to actually be a net positive. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. It's going to save you headache. But it's,
Including this redundancy, right?
yeah,
And here's where my brain went, just to digress a little bit, to go back to redundancy and to emphasize the importance of all of this is,
yeah,
my son is a very, very talented pitcher, right? Very, very talented pitcher. Plays a lot of baseball. That said, he throws a lot. Like, and you'd think at this point in time, having thrown thousands upon thousands upon thousands of balls, it'd be pretty redundant, but there's still some nuances he's still learning and working on and wanting to hone and get better at consistently.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the things that when you first mentioned it, I thought, man, yeah, it really does. It helps you polish and hone your craft and hone those skills and having that repetitive nature in there.
yeah,
So, but that said, like, I like all of them. Like, that's, you know,
yeah.
so
Well, and one of the things that redundancy accomplishes in online security is, if they get through one layer of defense, there's still another layer that they have to get past, you know?
ooh, I like that. I like that.
So, if you got a castle, say, and you got guards, if you sneak past the guards, but the door is locked, you still got to lock, pick that lock or scale the wall or whatever. You had to get over the moat first, whatever, right? Like, that's another way to
Yeah.
look at it. So, okay, so move on to number 2, skills.
Okay.
And again, this is just a skill like in anything else, no special meaning here. Um, But if we look at home networks, the main skill that we discussed there, I would kind of boil down to, how do you make changes to your router,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And if you think
Hmm.
about it, like, how many people out there, listening, I don't know, I hope most do now, but anyway, it's just an important skill. And one of the things is, as technology becomes more and more prevalent in our life, it's not like there's a lot of great basic computer literacy education out there.
Sure
You know?
about that?
Yeah. Well, and I know this is something like you've been talking about for a long
For
time.
years.
And when I help people, sometimes it's some of these basics that, I mean, in order to stay safe, you got to understand some of the basics. And so definitely part of what we want to do is go as low down, so to speak, as fundamental skills in computer skills, even stuff that doesn't necessarily feel really like online security exactly, but supports our overall objectives of staying safe online. And
Right.
sometimes, anyway, so we'll be getting into that as needed.
Yeah.
um okay, so type 3, habits.
Okay.
And we didn't really talk about habits a whole lot in our home network episodes that I could remember or find, but the way I would phrase it here is like a habit worth having is when you add a new device to your home network is, you know, considering the security implications.
Okay.
And that, and just for example, I mean, this isn't the focus, this is just an example to give you, but like review the security settings, for example, on any new device, because sadly, the default ones are often not the safest, right?
I was going to say that kind of makes sense, right? Like default ones are not always the safest. We've learned that through
Yeah,
how many
it's
episodes
sad.
now?
I don't know if it makes sense. It's sad to me, but yeah.
It
I
is
mean,
sad. I should say that, but we've had a few of these episodes now.
yeah,
As much as I would love to say differently, hopefully even our listeners know that unfortunately the default settings aren't always the safest settings. So,
yeah. Another habit is, well, and related to this, when you do bring a device into your home, or if you have the guest network, can you restrict it to the guest network?
hmm,
And
yeah,
another kind of, I kind of put this in the habit is anytime something's needed where you have to make a change to your router because of bringing an Xbox into your home or an Apple TV, and it's needing something.
mm-hmm,
Make
mm-hmm.
sure you don't just make changes to your router without understanding what the risks are to your home network in doing so,
Gotcha.
right? So that's kind
Yeah,
of a habit of questioning, and that one is hard because it could lead to more work or whatever, right? Like you don't want to
right.
put the blinders on sometimes or whatever, right? That makes
Yeah,
sense. We just want it to work. You want to get to the end. You just want the thing to work, and you shouldn't have to worry about, so to speak, the security implications.
right. Right, yeah.
At least we
Yeah.
wish we wouldn't have to, right?
I wish that was the case.
Yeah, but things just aren't built enough with security in mind yet. We're so far from that. It's
Right.
so anyway. So that's the first group of three:
Okay.
skills or knowledge, skills, and habits. Those are the solo layers. So the second group is the team layers: people, tools, and services. And this
Okay.
is, I call these team layers because you're dependent on someone or something else.
Okay. Okay.
That makes sense?
It makes total sense. Team
Okay.
layers is something that works as a team.
Yeah.
Yep.
And people, is kind of my favorite one. It's the most fundamental, most powerful. You mentioned in your story having a buddy with you,
Mm-hmm.
and we talk about this one a lot. I will be forever talking about this one a lot, of having a protection partner.
Yeah.
Everybody needs one. The other kind of big one that I humbly recommend for everyone is a guardian. People like me, but not just me. There are a lot of other people who are trying to help, other people stay safe online.
Yeah.
And so, for a protection partner, it could be non-technical, like we've talked about, whatever. But you also need somebody who, for the technical questions, for that help, you need that resource as well. They don't have to
Yeah.
be as immediately available, but you need somewhere that you can go to ask these questions. And I want to be that for as many people as I can. So
Yeah.
that's why we have the free online forum where anybody can come ask questions.
Hmm. Makes sense.
And then the last kind of people example is having a community, right? And I'm doing my best to build ultimately, it's not huge right now, but a huge, diverse community of people that can support each other in this journey. We can test out more services that way and give feedback. There's a lot
Right.
of really awesome things that with a big group of like-minded people who all want to stay safe, like we can really make some impact in making things safe for each other and for even all the people outside of the community.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so I'm really excited about that as well. And of course, back in the context of security sec, I get a little distracted about the big picture there, but you know, they play important roles in each of these things. Where, well, we'll talk about the specifics in the upcoming ones because we didn't talk about with the home network, but the most obvious one comes to mind: scams, like when we've talked about protection partner.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
really, really good protection in that context of just anytime you have a question, anything feels a little bit off, you run it by your protection partner, and that instantly just talking to somebody else about it. You have somebody you can talk about who's not going to judge you or think you're stupid for asking the question or whatever is going to be huge protection. And that applies to so many places in online security. So
Right.
that's an example anyway.
Well, and I think one important part of that too is also to take time to question, you know, is this valid, right? Like, or is this what you wanted, right? Take some time to question that, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and so it's kind of interesting because one of the key ideas with the protection partner is right. Obviously, a protection partner is not very useful if you don't have a habit of talking to that protection partner,
Right. Right.
right? So it's kind of a combination. You've got to have a habit, you've got to have the protection partner. And so they're kind of synergistic. But part of the reason why I focus so much on the protection partner itself is because doing that ahead of time and knowing that you have that, that is going to make that habit so much easier to develop because your brain's going to be,
Yep.
okay, I actually have somebody to reach out to. Because if you don't, then you're just going to ignore that. You're not going to be as likely to question because you don't have any place to go get that answer.
Yeah.
So why bother
Yeah.
asking the question?
Yeah.
And so that's where I feel like you've got to start. Is you got to do it ahead of time before you have the questions, and help work towards building that habit.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm glad you interjected there. So moving on to layer 5, tools, and this is probably the most talked about layer in general. This is your devices, your apps, software, security software, and
Hmm.
I think worth mentioning on their own is the settings, because this is a huge one. Settings within those devices, within those apps, are also I put under the whole tool category. Having since we just finished talking about how default security settings are often lousy,
Right.
and
Yeah.
usually the good news is there are a lot of tool options available to us. With home networks, we talked about the settings on your router, the 7
Hmm.
specific ones. The inbound firewall, the outbound firewall, the guest network. I'd call all those um, tools.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Oh, yeah.
So I don't really have anything else to say about that.
I was gonna say, I think tools, even the layperson gets, like me, like my first thought was, oh, this is what we always hear about. Get Norton, it'll save you from everything, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so closely related is the final layer, type number 6, services. And I kind of made this distinction because one way to think about it is a service is like a tool, but that's in someone else's hands beside your own.
Okay.
That's how I'm thinking about it. So, for example, and we didn't talk about this. I don't think we talked about any services with your home network, but an example might be a VPN.
Right.
So a
Okay.
VPN
Okay.
is going to be both a tool and a service because you have an app installed where you enable the VPN, right? So that's the tool
Yep.
part. But it's also dependent on computers that are controlled by the VPN provider, and that's kind of the service aspect,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
one that's just a service only that's really common is like identity theft protection service, like from LifeLock or ID
LifeLock. Yeah.
Shield or
Yep.
something, right? Where I
Okay.
mean, you don't
Okay.
do anything, right? I mean,
Right.
other
You
than
just
you
get
pay them
alerts.
money, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You get alerts, you hope. So it's just tools are still dependent on you. It's kind of like anyway, and services are just yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
so and they yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. I feel like it's helpful to um, break it down. Again, the whole point of all of these is just to help us kind of explore and find all the different options. And
Right.
so that's why I break it down, I guess, actually stepping back it's just to help us explore.
Okay.
So um, yeah, and out of all of them, services are probably going to be my uh, least recommended in general, simply because they're the most outside of your control. Just like we want to focus on building on ourselves, we'd like to have as few dependencies on other external as we can. Obviously, we're going to need some, so we don't avoid them entirely. But they're I wouldn't say a last resort exactly, but something akin to that.
Right. Right.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and I'm so one of the reasons why we haven't talked about recommending an identity theft protection service yet either. Uh, you want to be really careful. The farther removed it is from you too, the more you want to vet it and be sure that it really is a trustworthy, high quality service. So
That makes
that's the other
sense.
aspect.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all. That's the 6 layers: the knowledge, skills, habit are the soul layers. People, tools, and services are the team layers, and those are the 6.
Nice. Let's go. That wasn't too bad.
Okay, good.
Okay. What's our call to action, man? What do we want to hear back? What's some good feedback we can solicit?
Yeah, so right, this is the last one. Probably, I anticipate doing this one. A call for help for now. I think obviously, again, feedback on anything. But what I'm most kind of curious about is which of these kinds of layers do you feel like you depend on the most? I'm just I'm just curious which one different people go to because I know that trends on the internet and stuff, but I know individuals are gonna look to different things in different ways. So I'm just
Right.
curious to see what that looks like. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
come to the forum, share your thoughts with any of this stuff with me, and I'd be very grateful.
Dude, that's doable. Come to the forum. Yeah. Dude, do I get to tease him about next episode?
Absolutely.
Okay, look. You know me, and you know if I had my druthers, I would go back to a flip phone. And literally have text take forever, so you had to call for a phone call.
Right.
And but there is one thing about online that I really, really like. And this is the one thing that I think everybody kind of likes, and that's online shopping. Like, dude, I don't know what it is about me. Like, my wife and I love just window shopping homes. Like, we're not buying them. We just like looking at them. We'll spend plenty of time sending each other's phones, like, or sending each other texts. Dude, check out this home. Whoa. You know? So I love online shopping. And so the question is where we begin. And your master guardian, Makani, he loves you so much that he decided he's going to start our next series with none other than, that's right, building an online shopping security stack. Yeah!
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay.
Yep.
This is big for me because we purchase a lot online. So I'm excited to hear this. Guys, if you do any shopping online, don't miss this next episode. You're going to want to hear it.
Yeah. Amen. I know. One, I with you on the online shopping, mostly because I hate going, driving to the stores and stuff. And yeah, I think it's pretty common these days that,
Ah,
I mean, I've heard the stats on like how many people have an Amazon Prime, you know, membership in America, and it's pretty high. Like, there's a lot. So yeah, we'll see how many episodes we make this, because there's a lot of stuff that we could cover, and
yeah.
so we'll just see how much we decide to dive into. But I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm super excited. So, dude, that was a great episode.
Are you ready to take action and wondering where to start? Get my Bulletproof My Identity Starter Kit for free. The 7 most vital layers of protection everyone needs. I'll send you one step at a time and help you if you get stuck. Just go to bulletproofmyid.com and enter your name and email, and I will send you the first step. Again, that's bulletproofmyid.com.